part of the sales engineering team here at Hevo. Today, as part of the Learning Labs webinar, we are going to explore how we can create interactive apps on Streamlit applications and getting the data from Snowflake for the same. We have Mesh, who has joined us from from Microsoft. So Mesh is a principal technical specialist for data and AI at Microsoft, specializing in supporting Azure Enterprises customers in the retail and CPG sectors. With over a decade of experience in data science, business intelligence, and solution architecture, Mesh is also recognized as a Snowflake data superhero for his expertise and contributions to the data community. Welcome, Mesh.
Thank you, Arun. It's great to be here.
Sure. Okay, so going ahead, talking about the agenda. So we are going to discuss about what is the importance of having the right data management system for your data needs. It will be followed by a use case of how we can create data modeling on Snowflake. Then we are going to discuss what Streamlit is all about, how we can benefit from it, and then it will be followed by some hands-on labs. So to start with, having the right data management system is very, very important for your data needs, right? And there are a variety of factors which comes into play when you have to decide, okay, that which particular data management system or data warehouse you have to go with. But there are two major factors which play a very pivotal role to decide the data warehouse. First, that it should not only help you to insert the data in real time or with as less of a latency, but also whenever you want to query the data or whenever you want to pull the data for your downstream processes, it should not cause any substantial delays or major lags. The second important factor is that whatever data warehouse you choose today, it should not only help you to cater the needs today, but also tomorrow when your business grows, when you have high volumes of data coming in, you have more and more number of operations which are getting executed on the data warehouse. The data warehouse should be scalable and flexible enough to cater the needs then as well, without you requiring to switch from one data warehouse to another for getting your needs. And that is where Snowflake excels in almost all of these factors, right? And that's what we are going to discuss today to start with. Mesh, I guess this is you.
Hey, everyone. So excited to talk to you guys about Streamlit in Snowflake. What I can share is based upon my own experience currently and in a past position when I was working for Chipotle, where we were heavily using Snowflake. One of the things that as a data scientist is really challenging is being able to share the results of your analysis or your model with a broader audience. And one of the challenges that data scientists face is that they're very skilled at writing code in Python to do all of the data wrangling and the model development. But when it comes to showing something fancy in the UI, that's not typically a skill set that they carry, and that's more of a web development type of skill set. So the problem that Streamlit solves for data scientists in particular is to make it very, very simple to build widgets, sliders, drop downs, different type of interactive components that you find commonly in front-end applications without having to use things like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, all of the stuff that you need to make a website look really nice and make it interactive. So this is the primary kind of problem that Streamlit solves. And once I learned about Streamlit, I was very excited to start to play around with it. And that's where I realized how easy it is now as a data scientist. And it could be anyone that truly is in a data profession that just does not have those front-end type of development skills to be able to bypass that and build things that look really nice and are very easy to build. So that is by far the advantage of Streamlit. And then I guess to take that a little bit further, when it comes to the intersection between Streamlit and Snowflake, they work hand in hand. As you may or may not know, you can run, and we'll show this in our demo, but you can build locally on your local machine using Streamlit, and you can deploy locally. But then now with Streamlit and Snowflake, what you're able to do is you are able to take that local development that you've done and push it up to Snowflake and run that same application in Snowflake directly. So this is kind of the advancement, the evolution of Streamlit, where you are able to run Streamlit in Snowflake. And that's exactly what doing that is called. They call it Streamlit in Snowflake. And so again, you're running purely, your code is purely run in Python. You don't have to do any HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as I mentioned before, which allows you to kind of develop very quickly, writing a small amount of code to create a widget, a really nice looking widget. And there's many widgets that you can choose from. And then, of course, being able to pass your data into those dropdowns, be able to pass your data to your functions that you've created or to some software or Python library, machine learning library, where you can get a prediction back or whatever it may be. All of that same stuff that you would use Python for, the power of Streamlit is that you are able to do everything in Python and quickly see those results. And that's what we're really excited to show you guys today. Again, benefits of using Streamlit and Snowflake, as we mentioned, ease of use. So the development becomes very simple, takes way less time to just build stuff. And I think the point here is that you don't want to have to learn a lot of the front end frameworks because that is going to take time and that kills your productivity. So Streamlit solves that problem because you don't need to. You don't have to worry about the front end, and you can still, create interactive websites without knowing the common front end frameworks. And again, the documentation and community, there's a huge community out there that's very passionate about Streamlit. I know that when I was starting to play around with it, this might have been a couple of years ago, I was constantly searching for how to do stuff online. And I found that a lot of the questions were answered for me in the communities. Or if you go directly to Streamlit's website and you look at the documentation there, they have really, really good, simple examples of how to do stuff, how to build a bar chart, how to create a widget. And I think that's what really gave me confidence that this is something that I can really use on a day-to-day basis, or to build my prototype, start building my application, whether you have a startup or whether you are doing this as a part of your role in the organization you work in. Just know that it's the time it takes to get started is minimal because the documentation, the community is very good.
Sure. Thanks, Mahesh, for sharing the details on how integrating Snowflake and Streamlit would be would be very good combination for us and having your analytics on. Yeah. So after that architecture, so of course, having the right data on Snowflake is very important for your Streamlit applications. But coming one step back, how you are exposing your data on Snowflake is also a very critical component of the overall architecture, right? And that is where Hevo comes in, right? So Hevo, as a no-code ELT platform, we help you to pull the data from variety of sources. It could be a database, it could be a SaaS application like a Salesforce or HubSpot, or if you want to pull the data from any of your flat files which are residing on, say, an S3 bucket or a GCS bucket. From there also we can pull the data and load into Snowflake, right? And not just that, if there are any transformations or data massaging you want to perform before the data is loaded to Snowflake or after it is loaded to Snowflake, that also can be done using Hevo, right? So I'll just take a couple of minutes of yours and show you how easy it is to create a pipeline on Hevo without, of course, writing a single piece of script or a code. So I'll share my screen again. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So for those of you who are seeing Hevo for the first time, so this is how the landing page of Hevo looks like. We can create a pipeline going to this particular UI. Now, as part of creating a pipeline, we first have to choose the particular source type. And as I said, we we support variety of sources. And if I talk about the numbers, it's like 150 plus number of connectors which we provide out of the box for variety of sources, right? So as part of the demo, let me create a pipeline with blob storage as a source. I simply need to search for that connector, click on that connector, add the required details as in the connection string and the container name from which I am to pull the data, test connection. Now it will show me all the directories and subdirectories which are there. So say if I choose sales JSON, the directory from which I want to pull the data from my JSON files, choose the file type as JSON. A couple of settings, advanced settings, I must say. Click on configure source. Now we have to configure the destination as in the database or the data warehouse to which we want to load the data. So to talk about Hevo's capabilities per se, these are the data warehouse or database which we support currently. We also have Databricks and S3 as a data lake if you want to use. Uh, Going back to the configure destination, I have a destination, Snowflake destination, which I've already configured. I'll quickly choose it. A couple of settings. I'll choose schedule as in 1 hour. Like every 1 hour, I want to pull the data from my source. Click on continue, and that's it. In less than a minute, you can create your pipelines on Hevo without writing a single piece of script or a code. So it would take a couple of more seconds to start ingesting the data, but by the time it does that, I have a pipeline which I have already created as part of the demo. So once your pipeline starts ingesting the data, start loading it to the data warehouse or the destination of your choice. This is how the overview tab of your pipeline looks like, which shows you a summary of your pipeline, as in what is the source, what is the destination, how frequently we are pulling the data, as in ingesting the data from the source, how frequently we are loading the data to the destination. And then coming below, it also shows the different stages through which the data passes once it lands in Hevo, right? So the first stage is ingestion, which means that as soon as the data lands on Hevo, it comes to the ingestion stage. Then it goes to the transformation stage. This is the stage where you can perform your preload transformation, as in any kind of data massaging or data tweaks you want to perform before it is loaded to the destination. That can be done here. After that, the data goes to the schema mapper stage. So schema mapper helps us to identify for any schema drift or schema changes which has happened on the source, so that we can identify that, track those changes, and make the required change on the destination. And then ultimately the last stage in which we load the data to the destination, right? I'll just take 1 more minute and walk you through these stages. So ingestion, then the transformation, and yeah, sorry, one more thing. Because it's a flat file storage, so whatever files we have as part, as the files which we have ingested as part of the pipeline, that you can see here, the timestamp, the file size, and what is the status. So it is already ingested. Coming to the transformation stage, let me just remove this, go to the, yeah. So to perform any kind of data transformation, or we also call it the in-flight transformation, performing transformation before the data is loaded to the destination, we provide you with two options. You can either write a Python script. We provide the console write on the same UI. You can leverage the Python console to write your transformations, or we also have a drag and drop interface. So folks like me who are not very fond of Python, and we love having a drag and drop interface. So for people like me, Hevo provides around 25 pre-built transformation blocks. So for example, you want to add a new field before the data is loaded to the destination. Simply drag and drop that transformation, apply the filters and the required parameters, test the transformation, then deploy it. And you can in fact add more and more transformations on that. For example, you have a PIR data which you want to mask before it is loaded to the destination. Drag and drop and add it as part of the transformation. Again, apply the filters, test it out, and deploy it. Right? So it's a best of both worlds. We have both, the Python interface and the drag and drop interface. Now coming back to the stages, transformations, then the schema mapper. So quickly saying, schema mapper, based on the type of data we are receiving from the source, if the auto mapping is enabled, schema mapper automatically creates the table on the destination. We also takes care of the columns, the required data types, the required constraints. For example, if there is if there is a field which is marked as primary key on the source, we also mark the same as primary key on the destination. And not just that, we also take care of any schema drifts, as I mentioned before. For example, uh, for example, yeah, this subject field renames to topic, for example, right? Hypothetically. So that same change we track and make the required change to destination. So there is absolutely zero manual effort which is required to not just create your pipeline, but also to manage your pipelines, right? So that's the schema mapper. And then we ultimately load the data to the destination. So primarily we are an ELT tool, which means if you want to perform any kind of post-load transformation, that can be done using the models framework, which again comes as part of the Hevo's solutions, or Hevo's features, right? Um, I'm just being watchful of time. I have to cut short the demo, but these are the primary things or the primary features of Hevo through which you should get an idea of what Hevo is and how easily you can create and manage your pipelines. Okay, so I'll just come back to the slides. Uh, yeah, sharing it again. Yeah. So that's about what how we can create pipelines on Hevo. Now, talking about how and where Hevo is being used. So we have more than 2,200 paying customers who are using Hevo currently globally. Uh, and out of those 2,200 customers, we have around 450 plus customers who are using Snowflake as a destination on the platform, right? Talking about some of the organizations, some global organizations who are using both Snowflake and Hevo, Cox Automotive, Arhos, Shopify being one of the one of the marquee customers of ours, Flexport, Hornblower, and so on. We are also Snowflake Premium Partner for more than a year now. Talking about some of the use cases for which Hevo can be used, or for which our customers are using Hevo currently, it could be a supply chain operation in which you want to analyze your, how your supply chain is working. If and you can see historical trends that, okay, this particular warehouse has used this particular raw material for in this particular season, and based on that you can take proactive measures to make sure that there is never a dearth of raw material or resources on the warehouse of yours. It could be a customer support use case in which you want to analyze what are the most common types of most common types of tickets for which you are getting a call from the customers. And what is the turnaround time, what is the region, or what is your particular feature for which you are getting the ticket, and so on, right? And similarly, you can have use cases for your talent management as well, right? So this is about Hevo and how you can leverage Hevo for your data stack or for your ELT/ETL needs. I'll just give it back to Mash. Mash, that's you.
Thanks, Arun. Yeah, so getting back to the Streamlit side of things, the use case that I used Streamlit for, and that I've been using Streamlit for, is related to car analytics. And I am a huge car enthusiast, and I really was interested in understanding things like depreciation and just getting insights on cars in general that I'm interested in. And I wanted a way to do it easily, quickly, and found that, this Streamlit, Snowflake kind of combination was a great way to do that. I have my own personal instance of Snowflake, and Streamlit was something that I had started using some time ago, even before Streamlit in Snowflake, which I'll show you guys in this demo, came about. And so in terms of the end-to-end architecture that we'll talk about today, you can imagine that you have some data files. It could be CSV, it could be JSON, and they're landing in a data lake or they're landing in blob storage somewhere. You need to pick up those files, and you need to first load them into Snowflake. In this demo, I'm actually using Hevo to do that, which, by the way, that was my first time using Hevo, and it was super easy to use. I really enjoyed using it. That part was super simple. So with that raw data in JSON format, car data, I'm able to load my Snowflake table, land the data in Snowflake. Then from there, create a view. And once we create that view, then be able to use Streamlit to point to that view and really show kind of the insights and the analytics behind it. So that's what we're gonna kind of get into. We can go to the next slide. So a little bit deeper on that architecture. I know we touched on it in the prior slide, but from left to right, we have some JSON files. Those JSON files are sitting in a Azure Blob Storage account. Once we identify those files in the container that they sit in, easily we can create a pipeline in Hevo, and Hevo picks up those files. And as Arun showed in his demo, it's the same process. And then we can create destination tables. In my instance, the way I've got it organized is I've got files for each data source in separate folders. So you can think of, source 1, source 2, source 3, source 4, separate folders in my Azure Data Lake. Pipeline picks up each one of those, points to is the source for each of those pipelines is that individual folder, landing in separate tables in Snowflake. And then once that's done, then I can pick any of those sources, or I can combine the sources. But I need to do some enrichment, which I've chosen to do in Snowflake. And that's where the view comes in. And then finally, now that I've created that view, I am able to create a Streamlit application that points to that view to show off those insights and analytics. And that's where all the Python code comes into play. Okay. All right. So with that being said, cool. So now we're going to start the demo. I will start to share my screen. And give me just a second here. Okay. Arun, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Awesome. Okay. So what I want to do here is I want to give all of you guys a very comprehensive view of the end-to-end process of developing and deploying with Snowflake, with Streamlit and Snowflake. So what that typically means, if you guys can see my screen, you should see Jupyter notebooks open, is that when you think about kind of rapid development of any kind of single page application or any use case for Streamlit, you're going to start locally. And so what you're seeing is me in my local Jupyter notebook. I've got a few different tabs open, and we'll start by actually looking at what this looks like when it's deployed locally. So if you can see my screen, then you should see that I've got this, deployed web application, and I've got 3 tabs here. I've got a home tab, analytics tab, depreciation tab, and I can have as many tabs as I want, and each of the tabs can do something different. So just to give you a sense of how this is organized, this is a home tab. If I go to the analytics tab, maybe I have some exploratory data analysis that I can show off. And in this case, I'm showing a group bar chart, some insights on some cars. And then finally, the third tab, depreciation analysis, I'm going to have yet another tab. And if I scroll down, I'm going to see some data, which is coming from that view that I mentioned, along with different drop downs. And if I click on the drop down, I can see that I have the ability to select different cars. Then I can start to play around with some sliders. So this is the input side of the house where I can select different things to help me figure out insights. And then ultimately, I get this graph. And the key kind of insight here is that for this application is helping somebody understand what that depreciation looks like of a vehicle when you buy it, when it's early in its life, when it's almost brand new, versus when it has some miles on it. And the insight here is that if you buy a car with slightly higher miles, then you tend to lose less money because the depreciation curve tends to flatten out. That's the kind of the big idea with the application. Now, we're looking at this locally, and you guys may be wondering, well, you might be wondering a lot of things. You might be wondering, how do you connect to Snowflake? And all of that, when you're doing this locally, is going to be through the Snowflake connector. So when you have a few different libraries you have to pull in. One of them is the Snowflake connector library. You're able to basically securely connect to your database in Snowflake through passing this st.secrets argument. And what that does is that points your application to a file that has all of those credentials stored in it, but that is not something that you expose to the public. So you can see here that I've got this secrets, in quotation marks, Snowflake. That is pointing to a location in my file folder, which has all of these different important pieces in it, in a secrets.toml file where you store all of that information. Now, we've done a little bit of exploring on the connection itself. If you scroll down, you'll see that this is all Python code. For example, that dropdown that I showed you guys, the select box, this is that select box. So very easy to create those widgets. And then ultimately, as you scroll down, you'll see that there is a trend line that's created. And I've got a function that I created in my own separate file called car functions. That's what the CF here stands for, to give somebody the actual depreciation cost itself. Again, all Python, there's no front end that I need to be concerned with. Again, in that analytics tab, if I quickly go here, you'll see that I've got that grouped bar chart, and you might be wondering, well, how did he do that? The connection to Snowflake is right there. And then the bar chart creation is right here. So this is through the Plotly library. So if you look here, there should be Plotly Express. And Plotly Express allows you to make really nice looking bar charts, one of which you saw here. So the next thing you might be thinking is, okay, what happens next? And I'm not going to execute the command to get this local application deployed to Snowflake, but I will show you very quickly what that command looks like. So there's the Snowflake CLI, and with the Snowflake CLI, what you need to do is you need to pass a set of arguments. And well, number one, you need to do a pip install of the Snow CLI. But once you do that, it's pretty simple. You have some arguments that you pass, and this is what allows you to get your application into Snowflake, which is what we're going to see in just a few minutes. So I'm not going to run this command, but just to give you guys a sense of what that command looks like. And this is all in the documentation, which we can share with you guys later on. But to give you a sense of, hey, how did he get that local application into Snowflake? It's based upon this right here. And that's all going to be done through the command prompt. Okay. So I mentioned to you in that architecture slide that there's some data in blob storage. So you can see that there's some folders here. And if I was to just go onto one of those folders, you can see that I've got data sitting inside the folder itself. And now that I've got that data in those folders, I mentioned to you that I used Hevo, which by the way was super easy to use, to create these separate individual pipelines that would pick up my data based upon the name of that container, name of that folder in Azure Blob Storage, and then drop it off in my destination. So that's what's happening here. I'm not going to run these. These have already been run for the sake of kind of just getting through the demo. But just know that if you refer back to that architecture slide, uh, we're kind of going through it from left to right. Okay, so now you can see that I am in my Snowflake instance. And before we actually take a look at the Streamlit application, what I want to do is I want to show you guys where that data gets landed. So you guys saw that in that architecture slide, first there's a table and then there's a view. So I want to show you a little bit about what that looks like. So the folder that we picked up was CGS. It's got, uh, 2.6 thousand rows in it, not a whole lot of data. It's on a very specific subset of cars. But essentially, if we look at that table, we find that it's still in a raw format, and there's some enrichment that we have to do. We have to clean it up in order to get this application to work, which is where the view comes in. And so that table then becomes this view. And if we look at the view definition, which I'll open up. Oops, I went to the wrong one. Here it is right here, CGS listing. So I'm creating a view. You can see the columns that I'm choosing. And then you'll see that there is some very specific type of parsing that I'm doing using regex. And again, everybody's application is going to be different, but I find, generally speaking, that you absolutely need to have some type of a enrichment process. And I chose to do this in Snowflake. There's many ways to do this. I'm sure you can do this in Hevo. But again, this is just to kind of give you a sense of, well, can you just pass that raw data directly to Streamlit, or do you need to do something in between? In my case, I did need to do something in between to clean up the data. So now let's go back to the Streamlit application. If I click here, then what you'll see is, oops, that the application is now inside my Snowflake instance. And very similar to what you saw locally. Of course, locally there were multiple tabs. Now, this is not an example of a multi-tab Streamlit application in Snowflake. But maybe in a future demo or a future webinar, we can talk about that and maybe do another demo. But if you see here, I'm in Snowflake, I'm connected to my view, uh, and I'm showing you my application here, all the same stuff. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so he's showing us the final product, but what if I want to play around with it, change some code around? And in that instance, if I click on this icon down here, then I can start to see what my code looks like. So the thing is, when you are running Streamlit in Snowflake, you have to use this command to get the active session, and that is what connects your Streamlit application to your session that you're logged into. And that is a part of the Snowpark library. There's actually a few different libraries that you need to add once you get here into Streamlit and Snowflake. But essentially, Snowpark to get the active session is going to be super important. And then if you scroll down, you can generally see that things look very similar to the way they looked before. And let's see here. I want to show you guys something interesting. So let's, oops. For example, just to give you a sense of, hey, how easy is it to create stuff, to create little widgets and things like that. And you'll see that I've got this code right here. It's called test slider. And let's first take a look at what that looks like. So test slider is just to show you guys like, hey, there's this additional little slider, little widget there. and it's got this range from 1 to 100. I can play around with it. Now, how did I create that? Well, the biggest thing to know is that it's just a couple lines of code. So you do SD Markdown, which is going to allow you to declare or to label your slider. And then the next line of code, test slider 1, is equal to st.slider, where you are passing the range of values. And this is all it takes. So let's say I wanted to update this to 200. Then what I can do is I haven't hit save or anything. I'm just going to open up that tab again, and I'm going to hit run up at the top, and I can see that that change is now reflected. I see 200 here. So the ability to interactively create, develop, test, and iterate is very, very powerful because you've got your code here, you've got your UI here, and I think this is basically what allows you to be super productive in a short amount of time. So that's what's exciting about this. You can grow this beyond a single page application. There's documentation in Snowflake that shows you how to do that. And I'm excited to possibly do another collaboration with Hevo to show you guys that. But this should give you hopefully a really good sense of what the end-to-end process is like. Again, kind of to recap, we showed off, hey, here's how we do things locally, and here's how when we deploy things locally, what they look like. And then we've got our data in the source location. Then we come into Hevo, we create pipelines, and that's going to move our data in its raw format into a table in Snowflake. So now we're in Snowflake. And now that we're in Snowflake, we can create views, we can clean up our data, and ultimately connect that view to our Streamlit application. And you can see here that I'm pointing to CGS_listings. And then quickly create sliders, create little widgets, write code to do interesting things and deploy it. And then of course you have a share button here. I'm not going to share it, but just know that it's once you've got it at this stage, it is extremely easy to be able to share what you've created with your organization. And again, for me, I'm an enthusiast. I like to do this stuff. I like to understand things about cars. So it could be a personal passion of yours, or it could be something you have to do for your work, for the company you work for. But in either case, it's super easy to use. So with that being said, I will stop sharing and hand it back to Arun.
Sure. Thanks, Mash. So yeah, I think we are covered. Let me just share my screen again. Yeah. So the demo is done. So yeah, so for the audience, the floor is now open for questions. Mash, I see there are I guess 2 questions which are on Streamlit. Could you please take those?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So let me see here. I see a question, and I'm going to answer live. Hi, is the Streamlit code public on GitHub? Is it possible to share the code? Absolutely. This is all public. And I will get with the Hevo team to get that that GitHub link out to you guys, so that you can go and take a look at it. Feel free to, clone it and play around with it, and hopefully it helps you, build your first Streamlit application. But yeah, absolutely, I can help you with that. Another question here: how does Streamlit handle user authentication and permissions on the client side? Is it possible to allow access for certain users? That one I am not so confident in answering. I think that's a wonderful question. I would probably point you to documentation online to maybe see exactly how that works. Of course, you know, in my case, I've got my personal instance of Snowflake. I am the admin of that. So user authentication, of course, you do have to pass your things like your user name in Snowflake, and then there's, you know, passwords and things like that that have to be passed to get access to Snowflake for that connection to be authenticated. But it's when it comes to allowing other users, that's not something I've had to do, but I can understand why that's an important question. So I encourage you to maybe research that online and see if you can find more information on exactly how that works. My guess is that it's probably not very complicated to allow other users to have access to your Streamlit application, assuming they're all part of the Snowflake organization. Within your organization, they have access to Snowflake.
Yeah.
The whole idea is meant to share within the organization. You know, if we're thinking about this in an enterprise sense, you know, you're going to have people that work on the data science team, people that are data engineers, people that just focus on visualization. They're all accessing Snowflake for one reason or another. All of those individuals can get access to that Streamlit that you built. So yes, it is possible, but the details on that, I don't think I could speak to very effectively in the demo.
Sure. No, that answers Mesh. And yeah, so we can we'll touch with you again and post this demo or post this webinar. As part of the recording, we can also share the link of the GitHub repo of yours. Okay. So we have 1 more minute left, and if there are any other questions which anyone from audience wants to ask, this is the time.